Vishma revealed that he had been blessed with a glimpse of the divine presence that dwelled within Ganga. He knew that those who revered this sacred river would be showered with blessings in this life, and the next the Pandavas listened in awe as Bhishma's words painted vivid pictures of the river's majesty echoing through the ages like the gentle lapping of its waters against the shore in that moment, surrounded by his loved ones and the revered rishis. Bhishma, Alta. In the midst of a vast and vibrant forest, Yudhishthira, the wise and just king, sat in contemplative silence beside his revered grandfather Bhishma. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. As Yudhishthira spoke, "Grandsire, I seek your guidance on the path to righteousness. You possess the wisdom of the scriptures, the conduct of a noble king, and the attributes that distinguish you above all others. Tell me, how can one from any walk of life, Kshatriya, Vaisya, or Sudra, attain the revered status of a Brahmana?" Vishwa's eyes sparkled with ancient knowledge as he began to weave a tale of an extraordinary boy named Makina, born to a Brahmana woman, but fathered by a Sudra. Barber Makina was said to possess every accomplishment and virtue, yet his birth marked him as a Chandala, one born outside the sacred order of the Brahmanas. Vishwa spoke, the scene shifted to a sun-drenched landscape where Makina's father had sent him on an important task. Riding a chariot drawn by Makina set out to gather the necessary items for his father's sacrifice. However, the young boy soon found himself at odds with the ass, which bore away the chariot towards its mother, a wise and compassionate. She asked the Shias, perceiving Makina's distress, revealed the truth about his birth. "You are a Chandala, born of a union between a Brahmana woman and a Sivra. Your father is not a Brahmana, and you cannot claim that status." Makina, stunned by this revelation, asked the Shias to explain further. The Shias' words cut deep into Makina's heart. "Your mother was stained by her actions, and your birth marked you as one outside the sacred order. You can never truly be a Brahmana." Crushed by this truth, Makina returned home, his eyes downcast in shame. Upon his return, Makina's father inquired about his failure to complete his task. With tears streaming down his face, Makina revealed the Shias' words, "I was born outside the sacred order, and I can never be a Brahmana." His father's expression turned somber as he realized the truth of his son's birth. Determined to overcome his circumstances, Makina set out into the great forest, intent on performing the most severe penances to acquire the status of a Brahmana. For many days he subjected himself to unimaginable hardships, scorching even the deities with the intensity of his asceticism. As he prayed and fasted, Indra, the king of the gods, appeared before Makina. "Why do you suffer so greatly, O Makina? What is it that you desire most in this world?" Makina's eyes blotted. The sun beat down upon the forest, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Bhishma, the wise and venerable sage, stood before Makina, a young man with a thirst for spiritual growth. Indra, the mighty king of the gods, had been speaking to Makina, urging him to abandon his pursuit of becoming a Brahmana. Makina, however, remained resolute, standing steadfast on one foot for 100 years. His vows were strong, his soul well-regulated, and he would not be swayed by Indra's words. The god of the sky, Sakra, appeared once more before him. His voice, like thunder in the stillness of Makina, Sakra said, "The status of a Brahmana is unattainable. For one such as you covet it. But it is impossible to obtain. By pursuing this goal, you will surely meet with destruction." Sakra's words were laced with warning, his tone stern. But gentle Makina listened intently, his eyes fixed upon the god. He knew that Sakra spoke the truth, yet he could not shake off his desire for spiritual advancement. "But what of those who strive to attain this high status?" Makina asked, his voice filled with determination. Sakra's expression turned somber. "The path to becoming a Brahmana is long and arduous," he said. "One must first rise from the order of brute life to that of humanity. But even then there are many obstacles to overcome. If one takes birth as a Pukesa or Chandala, they will wander in that sinful order for a very long time. 1,000 years at least." Makina's face fell, his eyes clouding with doubt. Sakra continued his words, painting a vivid picture of the struggles that lay ahead in the Sivra order. One must pass 30,000 years before attaining the status of a Vaisya, and even then there are many more challenges to overcome. 60 Times longer than the period in the Sudra, order Metinda's resolve began to waver, his mind reeling with the enormity of what Sakra had revealed, and if one becomes born as a fallen Brahmana. He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sakra's expression turned grave. In that order one must wander for a long period, and even then there are many more obstacles to overcome. 200 times longer than the period in the fallen Brahmana order. Metinda's eyes widened as Sakra revealed the true nature of the path ahead us. But God finished speaking. Metinda felt the sense of despair wash over him. He knew that he had been foolish to covet the status of a Brahmana, but then, like a ray of sunlight breaking through the clouds, he remembered the words of Sakra, if one succeeds in subjugating.
In the realm of ancient India, a tale of perseverance and devotion unfolded. Metinda, a man bound by his vows, stood firm on one foot for 1,000 years, immersed in the depths of yoga meditation. His dedication was unwavering. Yet Sakra, the mighty Indra, appeared before him with words that pierced his heart. Metinda, Sakra said, "Your quest for the status of a Brahmana is unattainable. Your birth as a Chandala makes it impossible to ascend to such heights." Metinda's grief was palpable as he realized the futility of his endeavors. He repaired to Prayaga, where he stood on his toes for another 100 years, his body emaciated, and his arteries swollen. The Lord of the gods, Vaseva, watched over him from above as Metinda faltered under exhaustion. Vaseva descended and held him fast. Yet Sakra's words continued to pierce Metinda's soul. Your status is surrounded by dangers, and even those who have achieved it often lose their way. Metinda's anguish turned to indignation as he countered Sakra's words with his own experiences of Brahmanas who had failed to maintain their sacred status. He argued that his own self-disciplining compassion towards all creatures and self-restraint made him worthy of the esteemed position. Sakra's responses only fueled Metinda's determination. "Why do you afflict me further, O Sakra?" he asked, his voice laced with sorrow. "You are striking one who is already dead with each passing moment." Metinda's resolve grew stronger. Finally, Indra urged him to name a boon, and Metinda spoke from the depths of his heart. "Grant me the power to assume any form at will, to journey through the skies, and to enjoy whatever pleasures I desire. Let me also have the willing adorations of both Brahmanas." And Kshatriya. Sakra's response was swift and kind. "You shall be celebrated as a deity, your fame unrivaled in the 3 worlds. Your name shall live on forever." As Vaseva vanished into thin air, Metinda's life force ebbed away, but his spirit soared to a higher realm. And so the tale of Metinda serves as a testament to the enduring power of devotion and perseverance. The status of a Brahman, though lofty, remains elusive for many, while others who have achieved it falter in their duties. Yet with unwavering faith and self-discipline one may transcend even the boundaries of birth and social standing.
In the midst of a grand narrative, Yudhishthira, the wise and just ruler, asked Bhishma, the venerable sage, about the acquisition of Brahmanical status. He had heard that Viswamitra in ancient times had effortlessly obtained this esteemed position. Yet Bhishma countered with tales of its great difficulty to attain. Yudhishthira's curiosity was piqued by the story of Vidhabhya, a king who, despite being born into royalty, succeeded in acquiring Brahmanical status. Vishwa began his tale recounting that Man, the righteous ruler, had a son named Saryatai, whose lineage produced 2 kings, Haihaya and Tauthinga. These brothers were known for their martial prowess and their numerous sons, all of whom possessed great strength, skill in battle, and knowledge of the Vedas. The Haihayas, led by Vidhabhya's 100 sons, invaded the kingdom of Kasa, ruled by Haryasva, a king renowned for his righteousness. The invaders defeated Haryasva, but his son Sudeva succeeded him as ruler. However, when the Haihayas returned to Kasa and defeated Sudeva, Devadasa, another son of Haryasva, took over the throne. Devadasa, having witnessed the prowess of Vidhabhya's sons, decided to rebuild and fortify his capital city at the command of Indra. His kingdom flourished with Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, and Sudras living in harmony, surrounded by shops, markets, and abundance. However, the Haihayas once again attacked Devadasa's kingdom, leading to a fierce battle that lasted for 1,000 days. Despite his valiant efforts, King Devadasa was ultimately defeated and fled his capital, seeking refuge with Bharadwaja. The wise Rishi Bharadwaja, upon learning of Devadasa's plight, vowed to help him acquire a son who would vanquish Vidhabhya's party. The Rishi performed a sacrifice to bestow a son on Devadasa, and as a result, Pratardana was born. This young prince quickly mastered the Vedas and martial arts, possessing great energy and yogic powers. Bharadwaja infused his own energy into Pratardana's body, making him invincible in battle with shining armor, and armed with a bow, Pratardana set out to confront Vidhaviya's sons. The prince marched towards the city of the Hyayas, accompanied by the celestial rishis who sang his praises. Upon seeing their enemy approach, Vidhaviya's sons rushed forth on their fortified chariots, showering Pratardana with arrows and other projectiles. However, the young warrior, armed with mighty energy and the power of
the sun, was setting over the vast expanse of the Bharata kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the land Yudhishthira. The righteous king sat in deep contemplation, his mind yearning for spiritual guidance. He turned to Bhishma, the venerable patriarch of the Bharatas, and asked, "Who are those worthy of reverent homage in this world? Tell me, O chief of our lineage, that I may learn from you." Vishwa's eyes sparkled with wisdom as he began to recount an ancient tale. He spoke of Narada, a celestial sage who had once been seen worshipping many revered Brahmanas. As Kesava, the divine Krishna, approached Narada, he asked, "Whom do you worship? Who among these Brahmanas deserves such reverence?" Narada's response was one of devotion and reverence. "Govinda," Narada said, his voice filled with awe, "I worship those Brahmanas who constantly worship the gods Varuna, Vayu, Aditya, Parjanya, and Agni. They are endued with penances, conversant in the Vedas, and devoted to their studies. I bow down to those who are freed from boastfulness, discharge their duties with empty stomachs, and are content with what they have." Narada's words painted a vivid picture of the ideal Brahmanas, those who were self-restrained masters of their senses and performers of sacrifices. They were devoted to truth and righteousness, gave away land and kind to worthy recipients, and subsisted on fruits and roots, never storing anything for the morrows. Narada continued his discourse. He spoke of those Brahmanas who had renounced worldly attachments, living in forests and subsisting on alms. They were observant of all acts and rites laid down in the scriptures, fit and cherished their servants, and were always hospitable to guests. These selfless individuals, Narada declared, were worthy of reverence. Krishna listened intently as Narada described those Brahmanas who had become irresistible through their study of the Vedas. They were eloquent in discoursing on the scriptures, observant of the vow of Brahmacharya, and devoted to teaching disciples. These individuals, Narada said, were worthy of worship. Narada's words flowed like a river, describing those who subsisted on water or air alone, or on the remnants of food offered to deities and guests. He spoke of those who had no spouses due to their vow of celibacy, but still lived in harmony with society. These Brahmanas, Narada declared, were the creators of the universe, elders of the universe, and dispellers of darknesses. Narada finished his tale. Bhishma continued, "For these reasons, so worshipped those regenerate persons every day, they will."
In the midst of a lush forest, King Vrishadarva's kingdom was bustling with activity. His courtiers were busily attending to their duties, while his queen and ladies-in-waiting adorned themselves in jewels and gems. But amidst this splendor, a sense of unease settled over the palace. A pigeon, pursued by a hawk, had taken refuge at the king's feet. The pigeon, its feathers ruffled, and its eyes wide with fear, trembled as it sought protection from the monarch. King Vrishadarva, renowned for his wisdom and compassion, gently comforted the bird, saying, "Fear not, dear one, you are safe under my care. No harm will come to you while you are in my presence." He added, "I would give up my kingdom of Kesai and even my own life if it means sparing your safety." The hawk, however, was relentless in its pursuit. It so down its sharp talons outstretched and declared, "This pigeon is destined to be my prey. You cannot protect it from me, O king." The monarch replied, "I shall provide you with food, but not at the cost of this bird's life. Take a bovine, bull, or deer." Instead, the hawk refused, insisting that its hunger was too great and that it could only be satiated by consuming the pigeon. It argued that as a creature of the skies, it was entitled to feed on birds like pigeons according to the natural order of things. The king, however, remained resolute in his determination to protect the pigeon. In a remarkable display of devotion, the monarch offered to sacrifice his own flesh to sustain the hawk's hunger. He began to cut off pieces of his body, weighing them against the pigeon on a balanced scale. But no matter how much he sacrificed, the pigeon continued to weigh heavier than the king's flesh. As the king's body weakened, a commotion arose within the palace. The queen and ladies in waiting, along with the courtiers and servants, cried out in distress at the sight of their beloved monarch sacrificing his own life. For the sake of an animal, a mighty storm brewed outside, with thick clouds gathering, and the earth trembling beneath the king's sacrifice was so profound that it drew the attention of the gods themselves. Indra, accompanied by other celestial beings, descended upon the palace to behold the spectacle. The air was filled with the sweet sound of kettle drums and divine music as the deities showered the king with nectar and celestial flowers. As the monarch's body became a mere skeleton, he ascended a magnificent chariot that surpassed even the grandest palaces in splendor. Through his selfless act, King Vrishadarva achieved eternal bliss, ascending to the heavens alongside Brahma himself. Vishma, the venerable sage, spoke these words of wisdom to Yudhishthira. The sun was setting over the kingdom of Hastinapura, casting a warm orange glow over the bustling streets. Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu and Kunti, sat on his throne. Deep in thought, he sought the counsel of Bhishma, the wise and venerable grandfather who had been a guiding light to the royal family for generations. Grandsire Yudhishthira asked, "What is the most important duty of a king? What act must I perform to ensure happiness, both in this life and the next?" Bhishma's eyes twinkled with wisdom as he began to speak. "The worship of Brahmanas, O Bharata, is the greatest duty of a king. It is the key to true happiness and prosperity. A king should always show reverence to all righteous Brahmanas learned in the Vedas who dwell within his kingdom or provinces." As Bhishma spoke, he gestured with his hands as if conjuring up images of wise men with long white beards and piercing eyes. These Brahmanas are like well springs of knowledge and power. They possess a strength that cannot be vanquished, a wisdom that can reach the farthest corners of the universe. Yudhishthira listened intently as Bhishma described the diverse aspects of Brahmanas. Some were fierce and powerful like Durvasa, while others were gentle and soft-spoken like Gautama. Some were skilled in the arts of magic and incantation, while others were devoted to the practice of penance. These Brahmanas are not just learned men, Bhishma said with reverence. They are gods on earth, capable of making a king or reducing him to nothingness with a mere thought. They are the originators of fame and ignominy, and their praise or dispraise can change the course of a man's life. Yudhishthira listened with rapt attention as Bhishma warned against calumniating or disparaging Brahmanas. To insult them is to invite destruction. He said, "Their power is not to be underestimated, and those who seek to harm them will soon meet with discomfiture." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a dark blue shadow over the kingdom. Bhishma's words hung in the air like a challenge. Yudhishthira knew that he had been given a solemn duty to show reverence and respect to the Brahmanas who were the backbone of his kingdom. In that moment, he understood that true happiness and prosperity could only be achieved by honoring the wise men who possessed the power to shape the fate of kings and kingdoms. In the midst of a grand assembly, Bhishma stood tall, his eyes shining with a deep reverence. For the sacred order of Brahmanas, one should always offer the most reverent worship unto the Brahmanas, he declared, his voice filled with conviction. They are the kings of Sama, and it is they who confer happiness and misery upon others. As Bhishma spoke, the assembly listened intently, their faces aglow with a sense of wonder, for in the eyes of the Brahmanas there was no higher truth than this, that the peace and happiness of the kingdom flowed from their respect and adoration. Like a mighty river, it nourished all living creatures, bringing fertility to the land and prosperity to its people. Bhishma's words echoed through the ages, a testament to the timeless wisdom of Narada, who had imparted this sacred knowledge to him long ago. Let Brahmanas of pure behavior and Brahma effulgence be born in a kingdom. Bhishma implored, his voice rising with passion, for it is they who are the sires of all creatures, and there is nothing higher than a Brahmanas. He spoke. Visions of ancient heroes danced before the assembly's eyes. The Prigus, who had conquered the Talangas, the son of Anguras, who had vanquished the Nipas, and Bharadwaja, who had triumphed over the Vidhavyas. Yet despite their martial prowess, these Kshatriyas had been no match for the Brahmanas, who, armed with nothing but black deer skins, had emerged victorious. In this context, Bhishma recounted an ancient conversation between Vasudeva and the earth herself. The goddess spoke of a simple yet profound truth, that one should serve the Brahmanas, for it was through their reverence that all impurities were destroyed, prosperity arose, fame sprang forth, and intelligence or knowledge of the soul was revealed. Mahadeva, who had listened in awe to this discourse, exclaimed, "Excellent, excellent," and honored the goddess in due form. And Bhishma, his eyes shining with a deep devotion, turned to Arjuna, saying, having heard this discourse between the goddess, earth, and Madhava, do thou, O son of Pritha, always worship all superior Brahmanas with a rapt soul. Doing this, thou shalt verily obtain what is highly beneficial for thee.
The venerable Bhishma sat in contemplative silence, his eyes gazing out at the kingdom of Hastinapura. Yudhishthira, the righteous king, approached him with a sense of reverence and curiosity. The old warrior's words began to flow like a gentle stream, filling the air with wisdom. O blessed King, Bhishma said, the Brahmanas are revered by all creatures, their birth alone conferring upon them an era of sanctity. They are entitled to eat first from any feast, for they are the mouth of the gods, themselves the deities. Partake in the food offered to them through the Brahmanas' mouths. As Bhishma spoke, his voice wove a tapestry of reverence, and all the great objects of life, righteousness, wealth, pleasure, and emancipation, all flow from the Brahmanas. They are the friends of all creatures in this universe, their wisdom and knowledge guiding us towards our highest potential. Bhishma paused, his eyes twinkling with ancient memories. It is said that Brahma himself ordained the duties of the Brahmanas. After creating them, a Brahmana should never do anything else than what has been ordained for him. The Creator decreed, protected and guided by their sacred duties, they shall protect others, and in doing so attain to great prosperity. The old warrior's words dripped with devotion, his voice carrying an air of authority. By following the path ordained for them, Brahmanas shall become worthy of precedence over even children. In matters of food and offerings, their Brahma prosperity shall be a beacon guiding all towards righteousness. As Bhishma continued to speak, Yudhishthira listened intently, his mind drinking in the wisdom. The old warrior described the various tribes that had once been Kshatriyas, but had degenerated into Sudras through their disregard for the Brahmanas. He spoke of the Eshras, who had taken refuge in the depths of the unseen due to their enmity towards the Brahmanas. The element of space or ether is incapable of being touched. Bhishma declared the Himavat mountains are unmoving, and the current of Ganga cannot be resisted. But the Brahmanas, they are unstoppable. Their power and might are a force to be reckoned with. Bhishma's words ended on a note of solemnity. Do thou always worship them with gifts and obedient services, O sinless one, if indeed thou wishest to enjoy the sovereignty of the whole earth with her belt of seas. The king nodded in understanding, his heart filled with reverence for the revered Brahmanas. As Bhishma finished speaking, the air was heavy with the weight of his words. Yudhishthira felt a sense of awe and wonder at the power and majesty of.
In the midst of a gathering, Bhishma's eyes sparkled with a tale from ancient times. Listen well, Yudhishthira, he said, his voice weaving a spell of wonder. I shall recount the story of Sakra and Sambara, an encounter that would change the course of their lives forever. In a bygone era, Sakra, disguised as a humble ascetic with matted locks and a smeared body, rode into the presence of the Eshra, King Sambara. The air was thick with anticipation as Sakra approached, his eyes burning with curiosity. Sakra said to Sambara, how have you risen to the pinnacle of power? Why do all beings revere you? Sambara's response was laced with humility and devotion. I never harbor malice towards the Brahmanas, he began. Whatever they teach me, I accept with reverence when they interpret the scriptures. I listen with great joy, and having heard their words, I never disregard them. Sambara continued to speak from his heart. I worship those Brahmanas who possess intelligence, seeking knowledge from them, and venerating their feet with affection. They approach me with confidence, inquiring after my welfare, and if they are heedless, I remain vigilant like bees collecting nectar. The Brahmanas instruct and guide me, filling me with the sweetness of knowledge. Sambara's words dripped with devotion as he spoke of his reverence for the Brahmanas. I am devoted to their path, freed from malice or evil passion. Whatever they say with cheerful hearts, I accept, aided by memory and understanding. I consider myself inferior to them, and it is this very attitude that has elevated me above all others. Sambara's father had once witnessed the encounter between the gods and Eshras, and was filled with wonder at the power of Brahmanic instructions. He asked Chandramas, how do the Brahmanas achieve success? Some would reply The Brahmanas attain success through their penances. Their strength lies in speech. They wield words as their weapons, and by studying the Vedas or Pranava, they become crowned with wisdom. The conversation between Sambara's father and Sama had a profound impact on him, and he began to worship and revere the Brahmanas like him. Sambara, too, vowed to honor and adore all Brahmanas of high vows as sacred. Listen to Sambara's words. He was moved to reverence the Brahmanas, and so in consequence of this encounter he succeeded in obtaining the chiefdom of the gods. Bhishma's tale came to an end, leaving Yudhishthira and the assembly in awe of the transformative power of devotion and reverence for the Brahmanas.
The sun was setting over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered around Yudhishthira. The young prince's eyes sparkled with curiosity as he posed his question to the venerable Bhishma Grandsire. Which of these three persons should I regard as worthy of gifts? One who is a stranger, one who has lived with me and is well known, or one who comes from afar? Yudhishthira asked, his voice filled with sincerity. Bhishma's eyes twinkled in response. My child, all three are equal in their worthiness. Some may solicit gifts for performing sacrifices or paying their preceptor's fee, while others follow the vow of wandering and receive alms without asking. We should also give to one who seeks our help, but we must do so without causing harm to those who depend on you. Yudhishthira nodded thoughtfully, his brow furrowed in consideration. I understand, grandsire, but how can I know which person is truly worthy of receiving gifts? Bhishma's expression turned wise and gentle. One should examine the person with whom they come into contact. My child, if they possess qualities such as absence of wrath, truthfulness, and self-restraint, then they are indeed worthy of respect and worship, whether they be a stranger or one who has lived among us for years. If they embody these virtues, they deserve our consideration. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the assembly in a warm golden light, Bhishma continued his discourse. One should not regard as worthy those who deny the authority of the Vedas or approve of breaches in social norms, nor should we consider one who is vain of their learning or speaks ill of the scriptures. Such individuals are like dogs, barking and seeking to bite, but ultimately achieving nothing but their own downfall. Yudhishthira listened intently, his eyes wide with understanding. I see, grandsire, he said. Finally, you have taught me that true worthiness lies not in one's social standing or familiarity, but in the qualities of their heart and actions. Bhishma smiled, his eyes shining with approval. Well done, my child. Remember these teachings and attend to the duties of righteousness, for it is through such practices that one grows in prosperity for all eternity.
In the midst of a lively conversation, Yudhishthira turned to Bhishma and asked for his insight on the nature of women. O best of the Bharatas, he said, I wish to hear you discourse on the disposition of women. Women are said to be the root of all evil. They are all regarded as exceedingly frail. Bhishma, with a hint of a smile, began to weave a tale from ancient times. He spoke of Rishi Narada, a celestial sage who had roamed the world, meeting many wondrous beings along the way. One day, while traversing the realm of Brahman, he encountered Panchachuta, an Apsara of unparalleled beauty. Her slender waist and faultless features left Narada enchanted. Greetings, although of slender waist, Narada said, his voice laced with curiosity. I have a doubt in my mind. Do you explain it to me? He asked her about the disposition of women, seeking an answer from one who embodied the very essence of femininity. Panchachuta, aware of the weight of Narada's question, hesitated at first. O amiable one, she replied, I am unable, being myself a woman, to speak ill of women. You know what women are, and with what nature they are endowed. It behooves you, not a celestial rishi, to set me to such a task. But Narada's words struck a chord within her. It is very true, although of slender waist one incurs fall by speaking what is untrue and saying, however, what is true. There can be no fault. Thus, with a nod from Narada, Panchachuta began to reveal the eternal faults that lay at the heart of women's nature. Even if high-born and endued with beauty and possessed of protectors, she said, women wish to transgress the restraints assigned to them. This fault truly stains them. O Narada, there is nothing else that is more sinful than women. She spoke of how even women with handsome husbands and wealth would cast aside modesty to cultivate companionship with men who courted them. They would betray a liking for those who approached them respectfully, regardless of age or appearance. Women never take into consideration the age of the person they are prepared to favor. Or, Panchachuta said, ugly or handsome. If only the person happens to belong to the opposite sex, women are ready to enjoy his companionship. Vishwa's words painted a vivid picture. Women like the scene that can never be filled with water were insatiable in their desires. They longed for new companions and would stop at nothing to achieve it. Verily, women are like the words uttered by the wise Pantachyuta said, "Fire is never satiated with fuel a steam can." In the midst of a lively discussion, Yudhishthira posed a profound question to his king. "All men, O king," he began, his eyes filled with wonder, "are seen to be enthralled by women, blinded by the divine illusion that has been created. It's as if they are under some sort of enchantment, and it's not just men. Women, too, are captivated by their own desires, attaching themselves to men with unwavering passion." The king listened intently, his expression thoughtful, as Yudhishthira continued, "I've often wondered, O delighter of the curious, why man can't see through this illusion. Despite all the flaws that women possess, they still manage to captivate their hearts and minds. Who are these men, I ask you, who bring joy to women's lives, and who are those with whom women are displeased?" The king leaned forward, his interest piqued. Yudhishthira's words hung in the air like a challenge. As he pressed on, "It seems that while men take pleasure in women and indulge in their company, women are skilled at deceiving them. They weave a web of lies and half-truths, making it difficult for men to escape their grasp. Like cattle roaming from one pasture to another, women seem to seek new men with each passing day." The king's eyes narrowed, his brow furrowed in contemplation. Yudhishthira's voice took on a note of awe as he described the illusion that some beings possessed. "Samvara, Nammachavalai, and Kambayasai, the sum total of their illusions is what women possess," he said, his words dripping with reverence. "They can lie and weep at will, adapting themselves to any situation. They possess a cunning intelligence, one that's unmatched by even the greatest scholars. Fryaspati himself couldn't have taught them better." The king sat up straight, his interest piqued as Yudhishthira posed another question. "How can women be restrained by men when they are masters of manipulation? They can make a lie appear true and a truth seem false with ease. What sort of science is this that they wield?" The king's eyes sparkled with curiosity, his mind racing to comprehend the depth of Yudhishthira's query. Yudhishthira's words painted a vivid picture. Women were like chamberlains changing their collars to suit any situation, whether treated with respect or disdain. They seemed to have an uncanny ability to turn men's heads and stir their hearts. Even the greatest thinkers, he said, his voice tinged with reverence, have acknowledged that women are virtuous creatures. But how can this be reconciled with the way they behave towards men? The king leaned back in his throne, the thoughtful. In the midst of a profound conversation, Bhishma turned to Yudhishthira and began to recount an ancient tale that would forever change his perspective on women. "It is even so as thou sayest of those mighty arms," Bhishma said, acknowledging the truth in Yudhishthira's words about women. Bhishma then spoke of Vaikula, a wise and powerful sage who had lived long ago. This high-souled Vaikula was renowned for his ability to restrain women within the bounds laid down by society. Bhishma explained that women were created by the grandfather, Brahma himself, with the intention of being a source of joy and companionship. For men, however, as time passed, it became apparent that women were not content with their role in society. They began to pursue men with reckless abandon, driven by their desires and passions. The gods themselves grew concerned about this development and sought out Brahma's counsel. In response, the grandfather created wrath, the companion of lust, which further emboldened women in their pursuit of pleasure. Brahma decreed that women would be free to indulge in whatever they desired without any constraints or guidelines. He bestowed upon them beds, seats, ornaments, food, drink, and even the freedom to speak disagreeable words. Men, it seemed, were powerless against the allure of women's charms. Bhishma then spoke of a great rishi named Devasarman who had a wife named Ruchi. She was a paragon of beauty, and her loveliness captivated not only men, but also gods and demons. Like Indra himself, the king of the gods became enamored with her and coveted her presence. Devasarman, aware of the dangers that women posed, took great care to protect his wife from the allurements of Indra. He summoned his favorite disciple Vaikula and entrusted him with the task of guarding Ruchi during his absence. Devasarman warned Vaikula about Indra's many disguises, saying, "He is full of delusion. Every moment he assumes those forms that he chooses." Devasarman described how Indra would transform himself into various shapes, sometimes appearing as a Brahmin, sometimes as a Kshatriya, and even assuming the guise of animals, such as lions, tigers, or elephants. He could make himself invisible at will and was capable of taking on any form. He desired with this knowledge. Devasarman entrusted Vakula with the task of protecting his wife from Indra's advances. Do thou, therefore, O Vakula, protect this slender-waisted spouse of mine with great care. He said, O foremost one of Prithu's race, do thou take every care, foreseeing that the chief of the celestials may not defile this spouse of mine like a wretched. In the heart of the forest, where the wise Rishi Devasarman dwelled in meditation, the celestial being emerged Indra, the mighty king of the gods, had assumed a form of breathtaking beauty to entice the Rishi's wife Ruchi. His intentions were clear. He sought to win her affection and indulge his desires. As Indra entered the Rishi's asylum, he was met with an unexpected sight. Vakula, a powerful ascetic who resided within Ruchi's body, remained motionless. Like a statue carved from stone, his eyes, though closed, seemed to hold a deep wisdom, as if they beheld the very soul of Indra. Ruchi, however, was not oblivious to Indra's presence. Her eyes, radiant with beauty, sparkled like the full moon on a clear night. She longed to rise and greet him, but her limbs were bound by Vakula's yuga powers. Though she wished to speak, her words were restrained, and all that escaped her lips was a hesitant inquiry. What is the reason of thee coming hither, Indra? Taken aback by Ruchi's response, sensed that something was amiss, he beheld Vakula, the ascetic, within Ruchi's body, like an image reflected in a mirror. The mighty king trembled with fear, aware that he was no match for the Rishi's curse. Vakula, sensing Indra's unease, emerged from Ruchi's body and addressed him with stern words. A wicked-souled Purandara, thou art devoid of self-control. Thou hast forgotten the curse of Gautama, which disfigured thy body with 1,000 sex marks. I know that thou art foolish, with an uncleansed soul and an unstable mind. Indra, overcome with shame, retreated into invisibility, leaving behind a forest filled with the echoes of Vakula's reprimand. As the gods, king vanished from sight, Devasarman returned to his asylum, unaware of the drama that had unfolded. When Devasarman finally arrived, he was greeted by Vakula, who proudly recounted the events of Indra's visit and Ruchi's restraint. The Rishi was filled with joy at Vakula's conduct and devotion, and he honored him with a boon. You shall never swerve or fall away from righteousness. With his preceptor's blessing, Vakula departed to practice even more severe austerities in the forest. Devasarman and his spouse Ruchi settled into their solitary abode, no longer fearing Indra, who had slain Vala and Vritra with such ease. In this tranquil setting, the wise Rishi and his devoted disciple continued their pursuit of righteousness, guided by the unyielding power of yuga and the unwavering commitment to virtue. In a distant era, Bhishma spoke about Vakula, a great ascetic who had accomplished his preceptor's behest by practicing severe penances with immense energy. Vakula finally regarded himself as having sufficient ascetic merit, and he wandered fearlessly over the earth, renowned for his feat of puissant. Bhargava believed that Vakula had conquered both worlds through his penances. However, a ceremony of gifts was soon to take place in respect of Ruchi's sister Pravati, who was married to Chitraratha, the ruler of the Ingas. As Ruchi journeyed to the palace of her sister, she wore flowers picked from the sky on her hair. The queen of the Ingas, upon seeing those celestial flowers, requested Ruchi to obtain some for her Ruchi's husband Devasarman, some on Vakula, and ordered him to bring more of those flowers, which were said to possess great beauty and fragrance. Accepting his preceptor's behest without hesitation, Vakula set out to find the spot where Ruchi had picked up the flowers. As he arrived at that location, Vakula saw fresh flowers scattered on the ground as if they had been newly plucked from their plants. He took these celestial flowers and felt great joy, knowing that his severe penances had granted him this reward. With the flowers in hand, Vakula proceeded to the city of Champa. On his way, he encountered a human couple walking hand in hand, but their movement was disrupted when one of them took a quicker step than the other. A dispute arose between them, as each insisted that they were right and the other wrong. As they argued, both suddenly invoked Vakula's name in an oath, stating that whoever spoke falsely would meet with Vakula's end in the next world. Hearing these words, Vakula's face became sorrowful, and he began to reflect on his past actions. He thought about how he had undergone severe penances, but still faced such pain and suffering. What could be the sin that led both this couple and another group of men playing this to refer to his end in the next world as the most painful? As Vakula pondered, he encountered 6 other men engaged in a heated game of dice made of gold and silver. They took an oath similar to the previous couple, stating that whoever acted improperly would meet with Vipula's end. Hearing this curse, Vipula's mind burned with grief as he struggled to recall any transgression from his past days past, and Vipula continued to burn with anxiety. What then a memory arose in his mind? The manner in which he had protected his preceptor's wife from Indra's machinations by penetrating her body, placing limb within limb, and face within face. Although he had acted this way, he had not revealed the truth to his. The sun was setting over the forest, casting a warm orange glow over the trees. As Bhishma sat on a rock, recounting a tale to his king, behold, he said, the story of Devasarman. And his disciple Vipula Devasarman, a wise and powerful sage, had been watching his disciple return from a long journey through the forest. As soon as Vipula arrived, Devasarman approached him with a knowing glint in his eye. Vipula, he said, tell me of your travels. What did you see on your journey? Vipula hesitated for a moment before speaking. I saw many things, great Rishi. I met two beings who knew me well, day and night. They moved together like a circle, ceaseless in their motion. Devasarman nodded thoughtfully. Yes, they are indeed familiar with your actions, and the 6 others you saw playing dis, those were the seasons. They too know of your transgressions. Vipula's eyes widened in surprise. How could this be? I thought my sin was hidden from all, known only to myself. Devasarman's expression turned sterner. But that is a grave mistake. Vipula, day and night, the seasons, they see all, know all, and when you committed your transgression in secret, they beheld it as clearly as I do now. The sage's words hung in the air like a challenge. Vipula felt a pang of guilt and shame, realizing that his actions had not been hidden from those who watched over him. Devasarman continued, his voice gentle but firm. You were capable of protecting my wife Rishi, who is by nature sinful, but you chose to act in a different way. If you had acted wickedly, I would have cursed you without hesitation. Vipula's eyes dropped in shame as he remembered the events that had transpired. He had indeed protected Devasarman's wife, but not with the selflessness and dedication that was expected of him. Devasarman's expression softened, and he placed a hand on Vipula's shoulder. I am glad to see that you acted with integrity, even if it was not in the manner I had hoped for. You shall go to heaven relieved of all anxiety. As Bhishma finished his tale, he gazed out at the king with a serious expression. This is a lesson we can all learn from: the importance of protecting women from temptation and harm, for they are like the earth itself, upholding all that lives upon it, and those who would seek to do them harm will suffer the consequences. The sun dipped below the horizon as Vishwa's words hung in the air, a reminder to all who listened of the power and majesty of women and the importance of. In the midst of a tranquil forest, Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava brother, sat by the side of his revered grandsire, Bhishma. The air was filled with the sweet fragrance of blooming flowers. As Yudhishthira asked Bhishma to enlighten him on the root of all duties, the foundation of kinsman, home, and guest, what is the core of our responsibilities of grandsire? Yudhishthira inquired, his eyes filled with a deep sense of longing for knowledge. Is it not the marriage of one's daughter that stands at the forefront of all duties? Bhishma, with a gentle smile on his face, began to explain the intricacies of marriage and its various forms. He spoke of the Brahma marriage, where the father selects an eligible groom after inquiring about his conduct, learning birth and deeds. Bhishma said that this was the eternal practice of all good Kshatriyas. The wise have said, O king, to bestow one's daughter upon a person whom she likes and who reciprocates her sentiments. Bhishma continued, this form of marriage is called Gandharva by those conversant with the Vedas. Bhishma then described the Ashura and Rakshasa forms of marriage, where the bridegroom purchases the girl at a high cost, gratifying the cupidity of her kinsman, or forcibly takes away the girl. Bhishma emphasized that these two forms were considered unrighteous. The Brahma, Kshatriya, and Gandharva forms are righteous, O prince of men. Bhishma declared pure or mixed these forms should be resorted to without doubt. Yudhishthira then asked about the various ways in which a girl could be bestowed upon her husband. He described how some fathers give dowers to the girl's kinsmen, while others promise to give dowers, but do not fulfill their promises. Tell me, O grandsire, Yudhishthira implored, whose wife does the girl actually become unto those who are desirous of knowing the truth? You are the eye with which to behold. Bhishma smiled and began to explain that whatever acts of men have been approved or settled in consultation by the wise are seen to be productive of good. However, false speech is always sinful. The girl herself becomes the wife. Bhishma said, "The sons born of her, the Ritwiks, preceptors, disciples, and Upadhyayas, present at the marriage, all become liable to expiation if the girl bestows her hand upon a person other than he whom she had promised to Yudhishthira," and asked about the case where the girl's sire sees a more eligible person present himself for her hand after receiving dower from another. In the midst of a lively discussion on the intricacies of marriage laws in ancient India, Yudhishthira, one of the 5 Pandava brothers, posed an intriguing question to his grandfather Bhishma. If a person gives dowry for a maiden and then departs, he asked, how should her father or other relatives act? Should they consider her as their own property? Bhishma, the revered grandsire, pondered for a moment before responding. He began by explaining that if the maiden was the daughter of a wealthy but childless man, she should be maintained by her father until the return of the dowry giver. If the father failed to reclaim the dowry, the maiden would be considered the property of the dowry giver, who could even raise offspring through her during his absence. Bhishma then cited the example of Princess Savitri, who had chosen a husband and married him under her father's command. Some people applauded this act as an exemplary display of devotion, while others condemned it as unscriptural. Bhishma pointed out that righteous individuals, like Sakreta, the grandson of King Janaka, believed that women were incapable of enjoying freedom at any stage of their lives. Yudhishthira pressed on with his inquiry, asking about the authority behind the inheritance of wealth by others when a man had daughters but no sons. Bhishma responded by explaining that the daughter should be considered equal to the son in terms of inheriting her father's wealth. He cited the concept of yatuka, property, which referred to the share of wealth that belonged to the mother, and explained that if a maternal grandfather died without any sons, his granddaughter's son would inherit it. Bhishma continued by discussing the nuances of different forms of marriage, including the arsha, where a bull and a cow were given as gifts. He clarified that this practice was not considered an eternal usage, but rather a form of dowry or price for the maiden's hand in marriage. Bhishma then warned against the dangers of selling one's own daughter or engaging in other sinful practices, such as abducting girls by force. The discussion unfolded. Bhishma recited a verse attributed to Daksha, the son of Prachitas, which emphasized the importance of treating women with respect and kindness. He explained that showing love and affection towards one's wife was essential for a happy marriage and the prosperity of the family. According to Bhishma, women should be worshipped and treated with reverence, as their happiness or unhappiness could determine the fate of the household. The revered grandsire concluded his discourse by citing the words of King Man, who had entrusted women to the care and protection of men before departing for heaven. He reminded Yudhishthira that women were vulnerable to the seductive wiles of men and needed to be treated with compassion and respect. As the discussion
In the midst of a grand assembly, Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, approached his revered grandsire, Bhishma, with a pressing question. The young prince's eyes shone with a desire to understand the intricacies of duty and righteousness, as ordained by the sacred scriptures. Grandsire Yudhishthira began, "You are well versed in the ordinances of all the scriptures. Your wisdom is renowned throughout the world, dispelling doubts and guiding those who seek to walk the path of virtue. I have a doubt that I wish to share with you, and I implore you to enlighten me on this matter." Bhishma's eyes sparkled with pleasure as he listened to Yudhishthira's words. He nodded his head in approval, inviting the young prince to proceed. "Tell me, O grandsire," Yudhishthira continued, "what is the proper distribution of a Brahmana's wealth among his children? Is it true that a son born to a Brahmana father and a Sudra mother is not entitled to any share of the paternal property?" Bhishma settled into a contemplative pose, his hands clasped together in thought. After a moment of reflection, he began to speak. "Yudhishthira, as you know, there are 4 orders in our society: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, and Sudras. A Brahmana is ordained to marry within these 3 higher orders, but not with a woman from the lower order of Sudras. However, if through error or weakness a Brahmana takes a Sudra wife, he must undergo expiation according to the scriptures." Bhishma's words were laced with gravity, and Yudhishthira listened intently. "The son born to a Brahmana father and a Sudra mother is not considered a true heir," Bhishma continued. "However, out of compassion, he should be given a small portion of the paternal wealth, 1/10 For Yudhishthira's eyes widened in surprise. But grandsire, why should this son receive any share at all? He is not considered a true Brahmana, having been born to a Sidra. Mother Bhishma smiled gently. Yudhishthira, compassion is a virtue that cannot be overstated. It is through compassion that we show kindness and generosity towards those in need, even if the son of a Sidra wife is not considered a true, ere he should still receive some portion of his father's wealth out of piteous. Bhishma spoke. Yudhishthira listened with growing understanding. He saw that the distribution of wealth was not just a matter of strict rules and regulations, but also of compassion and kindness. But grandsire, Yudhishthira pressed.
In the midst of a tranquil forest, Yudhishthira, the wise and inquisitive prince, approached his venerable grandfather Bhishma with an eagerness to learn. Grandsire, he asked, through wealth, lust, ignorance, or folly, intermixture happens among the four orders of society. What are the duties of those born in the mixed classes? I beseech you to enlighten me. Bhishma, the sage and wise warrior, nodded his head in understanding. He began to recount the ancient tale of creation, when the Lord of all creatures had ordained the four orders, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, and Sudras. The purpose of this division was for the sake of sacrifice, a sacred ritual that maintained harmony within society. A Brahmana may take 4 wives. Bhishma explained, one from each order and 2 of them, his own order and the one below. He takes birth himself. Their children are invested with the same status as their fathers. However, those born to a Brahmana mother but a Sudra wife were inferior. Their status determined by their mother's order. Kshatriya may take 3 wives. Bhishma continued, 2 from his own and the one below. He takes birth himself. His 3rd wife of the Sudra order is considered very inferior. The son born to her is called an Abra. Wise old warrior went on to describe the duties assigned to each mixed class. A Parasara serves his father's family, upholding their burden. A Vandai or Magadha recites eloquent praise, and a Nishada catches fish. As Bhishma spoke, Yudhishthira listened intently, his mind absorbing the intricacies of social hierarchy. He asked further questions, seeking clarification on the status of children born to mixed marriages. Bhishma patiently explained that when a person of lower order begets a son upon a woman of superior order, the child is considered inferior and outside the pale of the 4 pure orders. The prince's curiosity led him deeper into the complexities of social intermixture. Bhishma described how various castes emerged from these unions. Suttas recited eulogies for kings. Vaidehikas protected women's privacy. Chandalas served as public executioners, and Vandi or Magadhas became skilled in eloquent recitations. As the sun began to set, casting a warm orange glow over the forest, Yudhishthira thanked Bhishma for his wisdom. He realized that the intricate web of social hierarchy was not just a matter of birth, but also of duty and responsibility. The prince left with a deeper understanding of the world around him, aware of the delicate balance between the 4 orders and the consequences of their interactions. In the days that followed, Yudhishthira pondered. In the midst of a gathering at the court of Hastinapura, Bhishma, the wise and venerable grandfather of the Pandavas, began to discourse on the intricacies of birth and lineage. He explained that a person's disposition and character were shaped by their origin, and that purity of birth was determined not just by one's family or caste, but by the acts they performed in life. A person born of an irregular union, Bhishma said, presents diverse features of disposition. Their purity of birth is to be ascertained from their acts, which must resemble those of good and righteous people. He went on to describe how a person's behavior, actions, and conduct could reveal whether they were truly pure in heart or not. Bhishma then delved into the various types of sons that could be born to a family. There was the Naruttaja, begotten by a man who had been invited for the task; the Prasritaja, born to a woman without her husband's permission; and the Patitaja, conceived with a person from a lower social order. He also mentioned the Apadwansaja, 6 types of sons born to men from different castes, including Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaisyas. Yudhishthira, the eldest and of a brother, was intrigued by Bhishma's words and asked for further clarification on the matter. Who are the Apadwansajas? He inquired. And what about the Apasidas? Tell me, O grandsire, all these things in detail. Bhishma explained that the Apadwansajas were sons born to men from higher castes who had children with women from lower castes. He listed 6 types of such sons: those begotten by Brahmins on spouses from inferior orders, those born to Kshatriyas on women from 2 orders below their own, and those conceived by Vaisyas with a woman from 1 order below theirs, the Apazidas. Bhishma continued were the sons born to men from lower castes, who had children with women from higher castes. These included Chandala, sons of Sudras on Brahmana women, Vritya, sons of Sudras on Kshatriya women, and Vidya, sons of Sudras on Vaisya womeness. The discussion continued. Yudhishthira asked about the nature of sonship. Some say that a son is born from one soil, he said, while others claim it is from one seed. Bhishma replied that true sonship came from the vital seed, but if the owner abandoned the child, the son would then belong to the person whose spouse had given birth to him. The wise grandfather continued his explanation. If a man desires a son and weds a woman already pregnant, the child born of her must. In the midst of a serene and tranquil forest, Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandava brothers, sat in contemplation, seeking answers to profound questions about compassion and pity. He turned to his revered grandsire, Bhishma, and asked, "What is the nature of compassion that we feel when witnessing another's suffering? What is the essence of sympathy born from sharing a life with others?" Bhishma smiled, his eyes twinkling with ancient wisdom as he began to recount an age-old tale. In days of yore, he said, the great Rishi Chivana, a sage of unyielding devotion and high vows, sought to observe the Udivisa vow, a 12-year period of renunciation from worldly desires and attachments. Chivana, with his heart filled with compassion for all living beings, wished to immerse himself in the sacred waters at the confluence of the Ganga and Yamuna rivers. As he stood like an animate post of wood, the gentle currents of the 2 mighty streams flowed around him. For a long time Chivana lived among the aquatic creatures, earning their trust and respect. He would sometimes sleep peacefully, his body submerged in the water, while at other times he would stand upright, radiating serenity and tranquility. The fish and other sea creatures would swim freely around him, even touching his lips. Without fear, one day a group of fishermen arrived at the confluence, their nets in hand, eager to catch fish. Unbeknownst to them, Chivana was among the school of fish they had ensnared. As they dragged the net towards the shore, they discovered the wise sage, his body covered with river moss, and his beard and locks green from years of immersion. The fishermen, filled with awe and reverence, stood before Chivana with joined palms and prostrated themselves on the ground. They begged for forgiveness, acknowledging their ignorance in dragging the sacred Rishi from the waters. Chivana, witnessing the slaughter of the fish enmeshed in the net, felt a deep pang of compassion. "I shall either die with these fishes or be sold with them," Chivana said to the fishermen. "I have lived among them for so long, I do not wish to abandon them." Now the fishermen, overcome with fear and respect, hastened to inform King Nahusha of the Rishi's predicament. King Nahusha, accompanied by his ministers and priests, rushed to the scene. Eager to make amends, he introduced himself to Chivana with humility and reverence, offering to pay any price for releasing the Rishi from the net. The king's priest then worshipped Chivana with due ceremonies, acknowledging the sage's high soul and divine splendor. Nahusha asked Chivana to reveal his heart's desire, assuring him that he would fulfill it without hesitation. In the court of King Kuzik, a wise and just ruler, a renowned sage named Chivana from the Pre clan, arrived. The king, eager to please his guest, offered him water for washing his feet and had all the necessary rites performed in honor of the sage. He then presented Chivana with ingredients for a ritual, including honey, and asked him to accept them. Chivana, however, did not desire any material gifts from the king. Instead, he proposed a peculiar vow that would test the devotion of the royal couple. The Rishi requested that they serve him without any scruples during this period, which would last for 21 days. The king and queen, filled with joy and respect for the sage, agreed to his proposal. As Chivana slept soundly in a palace chamber, the king and queen took turns pressing his feet throughout the night. They remained awake, tending to their guest with great earnestness and attention. Meanwhile, the Rishi slept without stirring or changing position for an entire fortnight, leaving the royal couple famished but devoted. On the 21st day, Chivana arose from his slumber and departed from the palace without acknowledging the king and queen. As he vanished into thin air, struck with grief, King Kuzik fell to the ground. However, he soon regained his composure and, accompanied by his queen, set out to search for the Sijias. They searched far and wide. Chivana's yoga power allowed him to remain invisible until he had found a worthy successor to carry on his lineage. The Rishi finally revealed himself to a young prince from the Kuzik dynasty who would become known as Rama. The righteous one, this remarkable tale of devotion and spiritual growth will have far-reaching consequences for the royal family and the kingdom. The story of Chayavana's visit to King Kusika's court serves as a testament to the transformative power of selfless dedication and the pursuit of spiritual excellence. It highlights the extraordinary bond between a wise sage and his devoted followers who were willing to undergo any trial by fire to prove their devotion to the Rishine, his connection. It is said that Chayavana's actions were motivated by a desire to prevent the stain of Kshatriya practices from affecting his own lineage. By testing the devotion of King Kusika and his queen, he ensured that his descendants would remain true to their Brahminical traditions, even in the face of adversity. The tale of Rama's birth is a reminder that greatness can arise from unexpected circumstances and that the pursuit of spiritual excellence requires unwavering dedication and selflessness. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that Chayavana's actions were not merely a test of devotion, but also a catalyst for the growth and transformation of those around him. In the end, the visit of Chayavana to King Kusika's court serves as a